before. I didn't give, no, I'm just kidding.
Josh didn't give me permission.
So yeah, 4 points, win mids, insurance companies in general are becoming a primary hurdle in the real estate business. Now, I'm not a realtor. I hear enough and see enough to know that that's what's happening. So Wayne brought up electrical panels. So right now, if you talk to any insurance company, they'll tell you that Citizens sent out a memo back in June. Citizens will write any electrical panel. It can even be a fuse panel, and they'll write it down. Citizens will write all electrical panels. But back to electrical panels, your other insurance companies, the primary ones are your Federal Pacific, your Zenskos, your Sylvanias, Challenger panel. And the reason why Challenger panel is one is because it bought out Sylvania in the early 80s and used many of the parts till the mid 90s. But those are the panels that some of your other insurance companies, that probably won't use. But Citizens will write all of those panels now.
Would you go over the panels again, please, sir?
Yeah.
Challenger, who else?
Zensko, Challenger, Sylvania, Federal Pacific. Anything that has a Christmas tree look to it. That's the easy way to say when you open up a panel, if it has red and green breakers, those are the ones they don't like.
How many more panels are there? We've named 5 or 6.
That's about it. Those are the primary ones.
Square D.
Square
key.
Square Ds are okay. There is a recall for it. The ones around here are pretty much the home lights. I don't have the information on me, but there is a Square D that had a recall because of a I can't remember what it was now. It was something with one of the bars, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but they'll recall it and do those for free. All the homes that we've inspected in this area, none of them had that Square D panel. So I can't say 100% for sure, but I'm hoping that the Square D panels that were sold in this area just weren't on that recall list. But if you go to Square D recall, you can find all the different panels. There's probably maybe 30 different model numbers for Square D that were on that recall list.
And Josh, speaking about panels, can you kind of lay out double taps and kind of some of the issues that you see? Like the panel itself is a fine, like okay to be insured, but what are some other issues that you will see that maybe will cause a red flag or something that needs to be fixed?
So, and every inspector is different. Okay, all I can do is speak on how I kind of write things up or how I foresee things. So the main lugs coming into the top of the panel when the cover is off. Technically, there's not supposed to be any other wires that go into those main lugs. A lot of times, Duke and Progressive and all these other power companies, they came in and they put in surge protectors. They tied them in. And in my opinion, it's not up to me to go against what the power company did. They put a surge protector in, tied it in. It shouldn't necessarily be a double tap, but that's just kind of what. Let's see. Yeah, if you get.
I'm just trying to get like a picture of the lay of the land here, so everybody kind of understands.
Yeah.
Not a great shot.
But the top lugs, they're supposed to have an extra notch to tie in extra wires is what they're supposed to have. So if you're looking at that right there, the black and the red wires, those are going into the main lugs. There shouldn't be any other wires that go in with that. But sometimes they'll add surge protectors. Technically, I don't write them up, but some other inspectors might write them up because it's not supposed to be there. But again, I don't write it up because the power company 9 times out of 10 did it.
Where is it supposed to be?
On its own. But it's a surge protector, so.
It doesn't protect the rest of the surface, right?
Correct. But what's supposed to happen is the main lugs are supposed to have a separate lug that comes off the side for those wires to tie it in. But they didn't start doing that until a few years ago. So now, they will have their own separate tie-in to the main lugs. Cutler hammer and Square D. If you look at the breakers, those are allowed to have 2 wires go in them, but they have to read 2 pull. But square D and Cutler hammer. So the little writing that you see on the outside of the breaker, a lot of times I'll take out my eye camera and I'll sit there, or eyeglasses, and I'll zoom in on it to see if it says 2-pole copper or it'll say 1-pole aluminum. Okay, so yeah, it's kind of small. But anyway, some of those will be like the one not okay, where it's saying 2-pole right there. And the reason why is because that breaker right there is actually a 220 breaker. So that's for like a washing machine or a dryer. It's something bigger than a single breaker. The one up top, that's a 30 amp, probably going to an HVAC or something. It's single wire, that's fine. But the one that says not okay, that's doubled in. None of your 220s are supposed to be double tapped at all. Okay, but your 110s,
As long as they're 2-pole.
right, it has to say 2-pole on it.
Now,
And
when you say double tap, does that mean it's powering more than one appliance?
yeah, they
Or
got,
an air conditioner and a hot water heater
Right.
that requires 220?
right, it'll have to have its own separate breaker on there.
So that should have another complete separate.
Yes, sir. Yeah. And more than likely what happened is the panel probably wasn't big enough to take another breaker, so they just tied it in. There's other ways electricians can make those panels work. It doesn't make sense, but it does make sense. So if you have 2 wires going into a single breaker, you can pull them out, pigtail it, put 3 wires in it, and plug that wire back into that breaker, and it's perfectly fine. And you're like, well, all you did was just run 1 wire up to 2 wires. Right, but that breaker is only allowed to have 1 wire, but everything else in the attic or in the walls is all pigtailed together anyways. Or wire nut, that's what I should say. So that's perfectly legal to do, and that's a lot of times what'll happen. Doorbell transducers, I see them all the time in the panels. It would be considered a double tap, but it's a transducer. It's not drawing power. Technically, I don't usually write those up. I'll point them out, but the doorbell transducers, I usually don't write them up.
And just so you guys know what a doorbell transducer is, it's the little box looking thing. It's former reducer, but get this thing here.
Yeah. And you'll see those. And like I said, sometimes they'll be there. Well, most of the time they're right there near the panel box anyways. Occasionally you'll find them, off on a separate wall or whatever. Honestly, I don't know if we're going to continue having those around with all the
Ring doorbell
cameras and everything like that. But those are transducers, so I don't usually write them up. But some people write them up if they're double tapped into a breaker. Okay, but again, the way I look at it is, it's a transducer. It's not drawing power. It's reducing power for the doorbell, not the blow.
Could you pigtail that and put one in?
Yeah, you can do the same. So the big thing that I want you guys to understand, if you don't know, whenever, and again, do not play electrician here is not what I'm saying, but so you read an inspection report and you understand when they say double tap, all they basically mean is you have 2 wires going into 1 breaker, right? Which again, no go for 220 stuff. That's going to get flagged. It's going to need to be pretty much resolved.
Right.
You guys are not going to be the ones playing electrician and pulling wires.
If you type in like square D 2-pole breakers,
Yeah.
maybe that'll pull up.
Let me ask you a question, Lee. Because this will trigger a $3,000 to $5,000 repair bill, okay? Are they asking to change out the entire box, or are they asking you simply to rewire it in order to pass?
Basically, you can just rewire it to pass it. I mean, you can either, if there's room, you can add a breaker and eliminate the 2-pole, or you can pigtail it off into the panel and bring 1 wire in. That'll fix it. It should be. Let's go back. A year ago, it should be less than a couple $100 fix. Nowadays, it might be more than a couple $100 fix, just because of the way prices have gone up.
What I'm familiar with, though, is they say you're gonna have to change out the whole box, which is what you're telling me is not correct.
Well, that's if insurance is going to require it. So those panels that I gave you earlier, those panel names, those are the ones that typically have to be replaced. But now with Citizens is going to write all those panels. I mean, it's hard for me to sit there and say that it's a bad panel, it's going to have to be replaced anymore. Now your premium might be higher
Yeah.
because of that panel.
Is the highest, that's the problem with Citizens.
Right. So if you're one with those panels that names I gave you earlier, if you're wanting to have a better insurance rate, then yeah, those panels you're going to want to replace.
You have to pull them completely out and repanel the whole.
Right.
Environment.
Right. And that's about a $2,000 to $2,500 job now, where just a short year ago it was a $1,500 job. So
That's what we're familiar with, and if you can't get insurance, you can't get financing, so
right.
it's a blind alley.
Right. So the one breaker that he has on the right, that's the 220 breaker. So that's only going to take a single lug that goes in there. Let's see here. See if you can find a single one. Those are doubles.
These are all two
Here,
pole.
do you go to that bottom left one?
This one?
Yeah, click on that one. It's not real big. But so if you will zoom in on the.
I think you can do a 360 of it. No.
Go back to the front. The connector, go to the last picture. I think.
Right here?
Yeah, so if you look in the front there, does that say 2-pole?
I don't see it say two pole anywhere.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, let me go back to that picture.
So this is one pole, this is one wire right here, AL, copper, aluminum, and then this is two poles, two wires for copper.
Okay.
Now, if you go to, this doesn't really give you the breaker picture of the bolts themselves or the nuts themselves.
No, you don't see the nuts.
Yeah, maybe go to another picture. But what'll happen is you can't tie two wires in at the same time together. What'll happen is when you have this, like, say this, you couldn't tie two in at the same time. This is a single pole. Can't tie two in at the same time. It has a square where they go in separate, side by side, one on top of the other.
Let me see something. Yeah.
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 But, like that one, same thing. That's only a single wire. It's a 220. Let's see. What's that?
Yeah.
Oh, but it's a square nut is what it is. And it'll have a place for the wire to go in at the top and the wire to go in at the bottom is what that is.
And I had to walk out, Jim, but kind of one thing we've been playing with too, when it's double tapped, we haven't necessarily had to replace an entire panel for double taps. We've just had to address the double tap issue.
See, so it has two places for wires, one to go on this side and one to go on that side. And that is a 2-pole copper. You'll never have 2-pole aluminum. So if it's aluminum wire,
If you even use aluminum wire anymore?
all right. Well, not technically in your new builds, but a lot of your older homes, they'll still have aluminum wire in them.
It was in the 70s for mobile homes.
Right.
Well, we've had them in single family too.
Yeah. Now breakers, and so on a 4-point form, it'll ask you if aluminum is present in the electrical panel. And, if you mark yes, and then it'll ask you, has it been, remediated or fixed? Aluminum wires, just because it has aluminum wires doesn't mean the whole house has to be rewired. You have breakers that'll handle aluminum wire. The problem that you'll run into is when you go to the outlet has to be able to be a copper aluminum outlet. If it says AL with a slash through it, then it won't accept aluminum. So then they have to use what they call Lumicons. So that's where your purple wire nuts come in, and they tie in the copper and the aluminum together, and then they pigtail it. I know I just blew everybody's mind with that. But just because it's aluminum wire, does not mean it has to
If
be.
it has a purple wire or not, it's aluminum.
Right.
That allows it to go from purple or from aluminum wiring to the copper that is needed for that specific outlet.
Lumicon or Copalooms is what they call them. Now, that's solid only, solid wire only. If it's stranded, then it will need to be replaced. But I haven't come
They even make
across.
stranded wire anymore?
They do, but usually not in aluminum, not in the smaller aluminum wire, not when you're using, a 10, 12, or 14 gauge wire.
Yeah, I don't think I've had a stranded.
Right, it's been a while, but if it's stranded in that smaller, then that will need to be fully replaced. But the solid, we always just find the solid aluminum.
And what about the sheathing for the wire? I know some of our older homes still have cloth sheathing.
So pull up cloth sheeting. So the 4-point form calls for cloth covered wire. All right, this has been a battle for a long time, and you probably won't. I don't know if you'll find it. Yeah. So cloth cover wires, they could be cloth covered, but as long as the insulator around the wires
As
themselves.
long as it still has, see the yellow and the black stuff here, that makes it okay. If
Right.
the outside is just cloth, that's
And typically that's back when you had your old knob and tube. So your old knob and tube wires is what was all cloth and paper covered and everything like that. So again, the big battle, and this is what,
this would
yeah,
not be good.
no, because that's cloth covered.
Right.
But if it's rubber or plastic insulated, then it's fine. Now, what we run into is electricians, contractors, they'll go out and they'll be like, oh, this is all cloth cover, it has to be completely ripped out and redone. No, it doesn't. But they will scare the ever living Jesus out of the clients and do it. So it's not always, and I'm not trying to defend or whatever, the home inspector's fault. The damn contractors, because they want to get the money, just like a house has to be replumbed because it's not up to code. Explain that to me. The house was put in 2007. What code are you talking about?
Right. Right.
You know.
So if you have the instance where cloth wires, we're going to use that term, comes up, what you want to find out, is it cloth sheathed, so it's just the outside cloth and the inside is still insulated by rubber or plastic, or is it a full-blown cloth wire where it is metal with cloth directly around it? That's ultimately going to be the deciding factor of.
And if it comes up on a 4-point form, at the top of the 4-point form, if it's check cloth covered wired, and they did not annotate in the notes or something like that, with a wires are rubber or plastic insulated, it's only the outside sheathing, then you need to get back in touch with that inspector to have them probably correct that or make sure that they.
What about the go screw in bus fuses? Those are probably in the 20s and 30s.
Yeah, so the bus fuses, again, Citizens will write them, but no other insurance company that I know of will write them, which I've only come across, in 8 years I've been doing this, I've only come across 2 of them, so.
Recommendation in that instance.
For the bus fuses, again, if they're going through Citizens, there's no issues with it, but if they're going through any other insurance company,
What about you personally? Do you live in that house?
hey, it's been there probably for 50, 60, 70 years.
I think that's the acid test.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's different though, and you know that. I mean, what scares me might not scare the next person, or what, scares the next person might not scare me. I mean, I'm not scared to pull electrical outlet with it still on and change it out. It doesn't, I know how to use needle nose pliers, and I know if I get shocked, it's gonna hurt, and I don't wanna get shocked. But does that mean I'm gonna trust someone else to do it, or is someone else gonna trust? That leads me to the point where Wayne was asking me earlier about why we always say recommend contractors to do things. The story goes, and the reason why it changed probably about 15, 20 years ago, for home inspectors always to recommend a contractor to do it is, supposedly a home inspector said the outlet just needs to be replaced. Didn't say anybody specifically needed to do it, and the homeowner went to do it, and he got electrocuted, not knowing. I don't know how you would not know, but we do have people in our nation that are like that.
Right.
And he got electrocuted, so he went after the home inspector.
See, that's a CYA thing.
Pretty much. Now, on the record, I always recommend a contractor do it. Off the record, I don't care who you get. that's not my business. All I can do is my job to tell you where to go. Now, do we need to talk about, certain things after things have been fixed? Yeah, we could do that. Are we here to, help you out and everything? Yeah, we are. So, but that's the thing with those. All right. So any other questions about electrical stuff?
Yeah, I got one. Grounding in the outlets. We've run across situations where they weren't grounded, and what does that mean? If I put my finger in there, I'm gonna be the ground and get electrocuted, or?
Yeah, you'll be the ground. So, okay, so a couple things happen with open grounds, pretty much. Maybe one of the ground wires coming from the electrical panel or coming from somewhere has got disconnected, either from the wire nut
You're
or.
testing each spot.
Right, we're plugging in a tester to check, and see. If it's showing an open ground, it's either come disconnected or if it's an old house that was converted from a two-prong non-grounded system to a three-prong grounded system, maybe the ground wasn't added back in. Open grounds, you can look, they have to be listed as a safety concern or electrical concern because of our new codes and everything. But then again, you go back to any of these old, houses, you go in them, they have a three-prong outlet, forget it. You better have your Apple charger with two prongs to be able to charge anything up, and they just weren't grounded systems. Right, exactly. If we go off of code, house doesn't have to be up to code, but this is where an electrician would come in, and just because we say it's open grounds or not grounded, he would come in and he would scare the bejesus out of everybody, saying the entire house has to be rewired and brought up to current code. So those are the problems that we have. But to be ungrounded, typically, unless it was a two-prong system changed over to a three-prong system, they just didn't add the ground, but typically it's just pulling the outlet, either getting the grounds connected or wherever they're tied in, it might have came unscrewed. It's typically not a very difficult fix. It's just time consuming to figure out where the ground might have came disconnected.
While we're on, can you explain a GFCI circuit versus a non-GFCI circuit?
So your ground fault.
And I know you're kind of playing electrician here, and I don't
That's
mean it,
fine.
but like
No.
basically just kind of why you point those out is kind of getting at.
So ground fault circuit interrupters, basically they were designed to be near water. So if for some reason, we'll use the blow dryer, everybody's, you're sitting there blow drying your hair and you're standing in water. I don't know why, but if the blow dryer fell in the water, as soon as it caught it, it would trip the breaker where no electricity goes through. That's what the ground fault circuit interrupter. When you're working near water and things like that, as soon as it gets, and it's small, it's 0.0051 mil. So as soon as it gets just a little bit of a taste of a voltage change, it will trip. And that's from water. So any outlet near water within 6 feet of a water source is supposed to be ground fault protected. A lot of your, and I think the Currys are on here, a lot of your roofing companies, when they're doing their generators and stuff like that, they're all on ground faults as well, just because of the compressors. If it rains or gets damp and everything, because they're walking on roofs, they're not grounded to anything either.
So, and then real quick to understand, obviously, if it's not on a GFCI circuit and that hairdryer incident happens, voltage then runs through everything and you have a I'm dead moment with the hairdryer instance a lot of times. So,
Or it's going to hurt really, really bad.
really bad, yeah. The one thing I also want you guys to be able to do, if you have a seller that says, I'm working on replacing outlets and whatnot, one, we'll obviously encourage them to consult an electrician to make sure it's done right. That's kind of the CYA part first. But you obviously have a little bit of knowledge to be able to explain, hey, if it's near a water source, you're going to want to put in a GFCI system, because, and then again, if you want to do like, why would I do that? I'm trying to sell. It's like, okay, well, let's just say you don't do it. And then Josh goes in, and as he's discovering it, he gets shocked. Josh is not going to be happy, and potentially you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, can be liable for some of these things. So again, you can pull out the liability card as well. if they're gonna do something, you wanna make sure that it's done correctly.
The one thing about GFCIs, well, two things actually. So you want to know what breaker they're going on. You don't want to put a 15 amp GFCI in on a 20 amp breaker. Okay, so
Gonna trip all the time.
right, it's going to constantly trip. You don't want to sit there and just put in a bunch of GFCIs all over the place, because then you trip one, they all trip, and then there's a certain sequence you have to probably get them to click back on for them all to come back in right. So there is a daisy chain, you know, GFCI leads the pack, and then everything else below it is just GFCI rated. So you really want to know how it's coming in and how it's going to work. You know, we've had it a million times where, you know, you trip the guest bathroom, that GFCI pops, you reset it, it won't reset. You go to the master bathroom, that's tripped, you reset it, it won't reset. Just for it all, especially your 80s homes, for them all to be connected to the GFI in the garage. So now to get them all back on, you have to reset the garage, reset the master, and then because the guest was the down, reset the guest. And that's the only way to get all three of them back on.
Yeah, and that exact scenario, I don't know how many times basically we've had, you know, final walkthrough happen and a buyer's agent calls me and says, hey, there's no power here. You know, and it's like, okay, well, the way that it was wired is literally all of the bathrooms in the house, whether they're on one side of the house or completely on opposite ends, are on the same GFCI circuit. So where they're sitting there hitting the button in the bathroom and like, oh, it's still not working, it must be broken, panel must need to get. No, there was just another one, not in a very logical position, but that's the way that it was wired. Like the garage, it was also tied to the garage one. So make sure you guys can go through that. Typically your guys' homeowner should know because they probably dealt with them tripping before. But something to think about before, again, all the panic alarms go off and, you know, thousands of dollars are said are going to be needed to swap things out and do this and that.
And I'm a huge fan of garage beer fridges, okay? But don't put them on a GFI. Because it's happened to us a couple of times, I'm not gonna lie. We've gone around doing our thing and didn't realize it was on a GFI and it tripped. And then people come home and it's all melted all over the place. It's a catch-22 on how we go about it. But yeah, you know, fridges and stuff like that in the garage, you know, try not to put them on GFIs. I mean, I don't know why people do it. I don't know why we do it, but it's just usually what happens.
Any other electrical questions? We'll see if anybody in the chat here has had anything as well. Oh, we're good so far. Let's transition into roofs. Obviously, yeah, right. Hey, y'all. No, kind of go over let's just talk about, again, we'll stick to the 4-point first. When a customer asks you to do a 4-point, what does the roof inspection consist of for that 4-point?
So the first thing we're doing as soon as we pull up to the house is we're going to identify what kind of material the roof is made of. You know, metal, tile. You know, is it going to be shingle? What kind of shingle? Is it architectural 3-tab? And then we're going to, you know, sometimes we pull the permits right away to see if we can find a permit. If we find a permit, it makes life so much easier for everything. Because then you have a 2007 permit. You know, we're 2022, it's 16-year-old roof. It's either in good shape or bad shape. We have no control over insurance if they're going to accept a roof over 10 years old, 12 years old, 15 years old. All we can do is just look at the shingles, go off the age. We pretty much use a 20-year, and I know Jim and I have talked about this once before. We use a 20-year, you know, life expectancy for all the roofs, but that doesn't mean we have to stick to it. You know, I mean, I've been on 18-year-old roofs that look phenomenal. I'm like, yeah, I'll give it another 5, 6, 7 years of life. You know, it doesn't mean it has to have 2 years. But I could be on a 5-year-old roof, and I'm like, you're lucky if you get another 5 years out of it. What do you mean it's only a 5-year roof? You know, but issues happen, things happen to roofs. That roof looked like it was pressure washed, and they blew off all the granules. It was only 5 years old. But it wasn't pressure washed. It was because they had a bad, poor ventilation issue in the attic after a roofer got up there and looked at it. And he says, yeah, he says there's just not enough insulation. So 3-tab shingles on the left, those typically have a life expectancy of about 12 to 15 years here in Florida. even though when you buy them from the manufacturer, they might say a 20-year rated. Architectural shingles on the right, sometimes those are 20, 25, 30, 50-year, shingles. All depends on where you're getting them from and what brand they are. Florida, 15, 18, 20, 22 years is just really hard to say. You can't blame it on sun. You can't blame it on shade. I've been on roofs that had complete sun the entire life and they look great. I've been on roofs that had no sun and they look great. I've been on them where they had complete sun and they look like they're about to fall off any minute now. So the roofs are a gut call. Insurance companies, and this is what I've read and what I've been told, they're absolutely, they despise any reports from a home inspector or a roofer because they just don't trust us anymore. I don't know why. So they're hiring engineer companies and they're hiring these other companies to come out and do all this stuff. So when we go out and do inspections and we do these 4 points, we always tell them, hey, don't be surprised if you see some snot-nosed kid going around with a little pole, walking around the house taking pictures of the roof. And usually we get a call back, Josh, we saw that person, and then they send it off to a person that has no clue what a shingle is, more or less ever walked on one, except for maybe in Home Depot on the floor, and they're looking at pictures to try to decipher what the life expectancy is of a roof. It's hard, and we fight them. Sometimes we win, but most of the times we lose because we're just a speck of sand in their eyes when they're up there in insurance companies as underwriters, and they act like they know more than us.
What about your metal roofs?
Metal roofs,
They're supposed to be lifetime or barrel tile roofs.
yeah, so your barrel tile roofs, your tile roofs, those are supposed to be 40, 50-year-old roofs. Yeah, they'll last that long, but the underlayment is the part that's the problem. A lot of these houses they built, and I'm not trying to pick on like a black diamond, but you take black diamond, it's all double felt paper. So once they start spraying a leak or they've had this or they've had that felt paper just starts to deteriorate and wear away. So now that's why they're having to get a lot of those roofs
The
replaced.
tile itself is fine. It's what's
Right.
underneath the tile that becomes the issue.
The tile sheds 80, 90% of all the water. And then the underlayment is your, the other part that's basically protects. That's why when you look at the roof, you'll see weeping holes underneath the barrel tiles. And that's so when the water gets in underneath it, because it's impossible because of the way they're built, it weeps out. So that's where the weeping holes come in on the tile roofs. So a lot of times your tile roofs, when you start seeing leaks, it'll be close to getting ready to repair or replace. And they're not, repairs on tile roofs, they're expensive, I know, but it's easier to do a repair on a tile roof than it is a shingle roof because you keep the same tile unless you accidentally break it. Shingle roof, you do a repair, you have to get new shingles, bring them in there, and it's discolored. So, but tile roofs are easy to repair, but they also cost probably 5 times as much to replace because you have to take the tiles off one by one or 2 by 2 and then replace the underlayment, and then you try to use the same tile to put back up. So.
Another problem is if a roofer doesn't know how to install those roofs, which happen with a major subdivision, they will not last and they have to be replaced.
Yes.
When you go across the line on the left, those
The landings.
the landings is the example I'm thinking of.
Yep.
I think they probably corrected most of it.
I think they've got most of them done, but yeah, those tile roofs were done. Also, guys, metal roofs, depending on hidden fastener versus non-hidden fastener, if you can see the screws on the metal roof, the person installing them has to understand how hard to drive that screw down because it's a rubber grommet. But when you drive a screw with a rubber grommet down as hard as you possibly can, that rubber grommet bows out or breaks, and then there is no more sealing with this rubber grommet. I've seen that before where ultimately, seller decided to go with the cheapest guy for the job, not the guy most qualified, and every single screw was drive down so hard that the rubber was bulging out, so it literally made it a prime area for leaking.
And usually your metal bends too, and then it leaves a crease in it. So.
Right. With the hidden fasteners, it's a little bit better because the metal covers up. When they lay it down, obviously you get another piece of metal over top that doesn't 100% seal it off, but again, it makes it less invasive to water, which is better. If you guys are ever curious, our roof here, the metal part of it, that is a hidden fastener metal roof, so you do not see any of the screws from the outside. I would say it's definitely the newer technology or the newer way to do it, better for metal roofs. But again, we're having all this stuff. I'm teaching you guys all this stuff, not for you guys to become the expert roofers and whatnot, but to have knowledge of some of these things. You always do want to consult.
I think he's trying out to become a home inspector.
Yeah, right.
You may need a second night time.
Painted metal roofs last longer than non-painted, correct?
And that's up for debate, because basically, if it's being painted, then more than likely it's an older like sheet metal.
No, you can buy a new painted.
Oh yeah, well the new paint.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought you were talking about painting.
So
Yeah.
the one thing again I go back to, and it's just like cars, how that paint job was applied and whatnot, because if moisture was underneath it or it wasn't properly cleaned, that paint then actually becomes more of a hindrance, worse than if it is painted. So a well painted new metal roof, I would argue, yes, will last longer. A poorly done one, probably gonna be worse.
You're talking about putting cool seal on it or something?
No,
like,
corrugated metal roof's already painted, already colored.
Yeah, like you can buy them. So like Quaid sells the corrugated metal panels already in a green if you want a green instead of the regular stainless finish or aluminum.
It's just like on cars. They have a sealant that goes on them. It's clear coat. When you buy the regular the gray ones, you can sit there and look, and after they've been on a roof for a while, you'll see them. They'll start the clear coat will start coming off,
peeling up a little bit. Right.
And usually when you see that, and it'll start around the screws because that's where you penetrate it, and that's where you start seeing the rusting. So with the screws, also the ones that you can see, you'll see them start backing out. That's screw maintenance. That'll have to be done every few years on the metal roof because of the expanding contraction. It'll make those screws start to back out. Sometimes they have to take those screws out and put bigger screws in to make sure that they're fastened in right.
We're still on roofs. Can you talk about just a little bit on a shingle roof? Because again, that's mainly what we're dealing with. When they install it, the amount of nails used versus like.
So Mike could probably answer this. I think on the 3-tab shingles, I think it's six nails on them, and the architecturals it's 7 or 8.
Right.
Is what they went to. The nailing on the shingles, I don't know as much about. I'm not as up to code on that as a roofer would be, but I know the nail outs, the deck boards, the trusses, they have to put in number 8 nails. They have to be no more than 6 inches apart. That's for wind mitigation credits.
And that's kind of where I was getting to, is because you're right. That was what I was trying to.
Yeah. So that's that, and then when they do the underlayment, you got to make sure if it's SWR, if it's a secondary water resistor, it has to be the peel and stick. The felt paper and the Tyvek, insurance won't accept it. It says right on the form, adhesive. So it cannot be nailed down. It has to be adhesive down. So it has to be the peel and stick.
What's the adhesive? Is it the shingle or?
No, the underlayment that goes underneath.
Tiger paw, or not tiger paw, what's the
Peel
one?
and stick is basically what they're calling it.
Yeah.
The tiger, so different names. We just call it the peel and stick. And you can see it. It's shiny. You can't use the white or the black or the green or whatever. The Tyvek, which I know that's some of the new stuff. It's plastic. It's better from what I understand than the felt paper, but because it's not an adhesive, it's not considered a secondary water resistor.
Right.
Right. So.
Or they're using cap nails there and they don't get it right. All of that.
Right. So, but
Staples.
they use the nails. They everything
With the plastic head.
Yeah.
You've seen those? I haven't seen Staples in a while.
Staples have been gone since sometime in the 90s. I don't know exactly when in the 90s, but sometime in the 90s.
All right, so we got roofs, plumbing. Talk about for the 4-point. I mean, kind of what's your run through?
As long as there's no visible leaks, plumbing should be fine. Water heaters, when they're hitting that 20-year mark, I do know insurance and even citizens They don't like things hitting that 20-year mark. So that water heater is hitting the 20-year mark. Drip legs, if drip legs are missing, they want those put on. If it's inside the house, they want it with a pan, which was really difficult for mobile homes. So your mobile homes, if they have them inside the closets and they don't have a drip pan, which most of the time they build them that way without a drip pan, they're making it a big deal. So they want those drip pans underneath them.
And this is a really big point I want you guys to hit very hard on. When Josh and most inspectors go do a home inspection and there is laundry in the washing machine or in the dryer, they're not going to pull that stuff out. They also don't want to run it because, again, if somebody threw bleach in or whatever, that's not the dishwashers. If there's dishes in the dishwasher,
I'll run it on recycle.
okay, so
Yeah.
that's kind of the gray area maybe, but I don't know if all inspectors do. What I want to point out with that though is we had a plumbing issue on a washing machine, and Jim can ultimately probably tell this one better than I can. But long story short, there ended up being like a dip in the piping, I think, and it was like we got to rip up the tile, break out the concrete and all that stuff. And originally it's like, well, it's the inspector's fault, they didn't find it. Well, come to find out, was there laundry in the washing machine and whatnot? And again, that's that. So I want you guys to coach your customers, your sellers especially. Hey, Tuesday at 10 o'clock, the inspector's going to show up. Please make sure your dishwasher is empty. Please make sure your washing machine and dryer. They are going to inspect all appliances, make sure they can get to them. If your air handler has 1,000 things blocking it, that's going to be an issue for them. And again, do you want to kill your deal because the inspector's going to say, I couldn't get to it, and then the buyer says, well, I don't feel comfortable moving forward because the inspector wasn't able to do it. It's not worth all of that hassle. So educate your guys as sellers to make sure all of that stuff is accessible for them to inspect it.
The big thing,
Put that, we should give that as a public service to the sellers, so they know that.
Yeah.
That house that you're talking about was sold for over $1 million, and it's a terrible thing to pay $1 million for a house and then have the plumbing fail. It's totally uncalled for.
And it hurts our relationship with the customer as well. We can sit there and stand, well, not our fault, we didn't do anything wrong, but that doesn't solve the problem and doesn't help the customer. So again, we try and avoid those surprises before they ever happen by making sure Josh and other inspectors can access those things appropriately. So go ahead, Josh.
yeah, stuff like that. I mean, there might be inspectors out there that move stuff. We don't necessarily move a whole lot of stuff. I mean, we'll move little things here and there. And the reason why is as soon as you move something small and it gets broke, then, instead of it being a $5, repair, it's a $500 repair. And there wasn't a big deal about it before, but then the buyers backed out of it, so now it's a huge deal. It just always falls back on the inspector. But, to be trying to touch personal items, removing clothes, putting clothes back in, doing this, doing that, it's just something that, I don't know many inspectors that do.
We've had people complain though about inspectors tearing things apart in some fashion or form. Insulators around a hot water heater, or they're taking something apart, or what did they do? Wayne, somebody was jumping up and down on the roof, and then somebody dug a septic tank up, and that didn't put the dirt back. I mean, do you take?
Well, that was the septic company for the septic tank one, which we were shocked on. The roof thing, that was a neighbor saying someone was jumping on the roof, so it turns into the he said, she said thing. But I guess when you're up on a roof inspecting, whether it's for a 4-point or not, again, I don't think you're jumping on it is some kind of way of measuring a life, Right.
Hot water heater, the jacket around the hot water heater was cut into, just things that should be put back, I would think.
A lot of times, so the roofs, I mean, if we walk on the roofs, I'm not jumping on no damn roof. I'm just gonna walk it, I'm gonna find the trusses and make sure I don't fall through. So, no, we're not.
We've had that happen too in the attic, where they step up a big one, you comes through the, yeah.
Hey, 9 years. A guy first day, he fell through. um, but no,
yeah, I mean, obviously, our expectation is everything gets put back the way that it was
Right.
found, right? And that's what we.
so this will go. So this can go back to a couple of different things. This goes back to when you're either recommending the home inspector or your clients are looking for home inspectors. A couple things. Number one, do they have general liability insurance? Florida says they have to have $300,000. Are they covered? Who's doing the inspection for them? Are there guys that are doing the inspection covered? Because you can't have Josh as being covered, but then I send Joe out there to do the inspection and Joe's not covered under my insurance, because then that's a problem. Joe screws up. Well, Josh wasn't there. How are you going to go after Josh? It was him. And, they're not. So you got to make sure, number one, whoever inspection company you have, number one, they have general liability and then they have errors and omissions. Okay. So
Is
again,
there a
Jim,
licensing requirement to be a home inspector?
yes,
And what does that entail?
120-hour course, take a state test, pass it, and then 14 hours every 2 years, CEU credits. But
You should have your certifications when you make a
I got it.
presentation to a real estate company.
yeah,
Sure we are.
I think, and Wayne, if I didn't, I think I've sent all my stuff over
Yep.
here before.
I got it.
So I've sent all my licensing, my general liability and errors and omissions. It's not something now, granted, like I said before, if someone wants to make a claim against me, that's fine. They come through me. That don't mean you hand them my insurance stuff. I mean, that's all going through me and what I need to do. That's just so that we do have everything, is what that is. So, I mean, ultimately that's it. Back to the roofs, we don't jump on roofs, we just walk the roofs. I'm not trying to cause
So let
damage.
me make another example, which isn't as extreme but more damaging. We had a home inspector walk on a tile roof and break a number of tiles which couldn't be matched in Citrus Hills, and it looked terrible when they did replace them because there wasn't a match. That's just an example of some things that have happened to us anyway. And, you can't repair that. You just have to have enough sense not to go up there and walk on a shingle roof, I would assume.
Well, shingle roofs, we can walk on. Metal,
Shingle.
yeah, tile roofs. Metal roofs, pin on the pitch and the time of day. On a metal roof, first thing in the morning, it doesn't matter if it's flat. I'm not walking on it, because it always carries the dew and it's like ice skating, and I never took that up. So, tile roofs, we don't walk them hardly anymore. I mean, my one guy, Robert, who only weighs about 100 pounds, he can walk them, but the rest of us, we don't walk them. We'll fly them.
Period.
Yeah.
They're too fragile.
Yeah, we'll fly them with drones, or we'll put the thing up on the edges and go around. If one of my guys are walking them, I'd be surprised, because all the pictures I see of our tile roofs are taken from the ground or with a drone now. The only problem with the drone on the tile roofs is you can't see everything. You can't see all the defects, if there is any. So.
You can't see under the tile either, can you?
Right, yeah. And it's just like when you're in the attic, you can look and see if you see stains, but you can't look in the entire attic. So.
One last question regarding that issue. What is the maximum liability you have? I've been told it's only the cost of the inspection. Is that still true, or is that?
So you have to read the agreements. So ours right now is at 1.5 times. So it's where we're at. But again, and I'll be the first to admit to anybody, the court of law might say different.
But if your inspection costs 500, you're saying.
750 is what our agreement will say that we're liable for.
So people need to be aware that you're looking at it, it's a different set of eyes, it's an expert set of eyes. It isn't the sure cure fix it all in case something goes wrong.
Well, yeah, and basically the way our agreement is written, and it's in our reports in several places, is this is not a warranty or a guarantee. We're there to look at things, and prime example. I mean, I drive my truck every day, but I jump in it, in the morning, it won't start. Things happen that we have no control over. A couple weeks ago, last week I was at a guy's house. He has a plumbing chase, and all of a sudden he has a ring in it where a water pipe's leaking. Well, we did the inspection a month ago, and he just moved in, and then after being there 2 weeks, he sees this ring. Well, he thinks it's something we did. I'll go over there. He cuts it open. We're looking at all the plumbing upstairs, running the water, doing this. I mean, we did everything for an hour and a half. Could not find a single drip. I have no idea how that stain got there. After everybody went and took showers that night, boom, it started leaking. But we sat there, so what I'm getting at is could I have been held liable for that? I don't think the court of law would have found that and being held liable because it was concealed. It was 6 weeks after we did the inspection. And then we sat there for almost 2 hours trying to get the leak again, and we couldn't. So
What we need to do is, we as realtors have to explain that you as home inspectors are not, it could give you a false sense of security. You are human and you are looking at things, you cannot have x-ray vision. This is just another set of eyes and an expert looking at something and not warranting it, just giving an opinion.
pretty much, I mean, and I think if you recall, a home inspector is married to that house for a year. And that's state law. So if there's negligence on that home inspector, that's a year. Granted, you got to prove the negligence, so.
You define that a little more fully, what you mean for a year, what you warranting for a year.
But well, there's no warranty, but if there's.
Well, I'll use the example of the termites underneath the sink. So basically, and I don't remember if this was you guys or not, but home inspection happened, and the home inspector failed to open up the cabinet doors underneath the sink. They missed it. They forgot or got bit, whatever happened. And then the buyer moves in, and this was not a used bathroom, a regularly used bathroom. Well, I think it was 3 or 4 or 5 months down the road, the cabinets finally got opened up, and boom, there was termite damage there that was not on the report. That bathroom was reported on, like the shower, it said needs grout or caulking or whatever. And so we turned around and said, what can you do about this? And this inspector did own up and say, yeah, that was negligence. I should have, per my inspection, opened that up to check whether there was plumbing leaking and all that stuff, and it was just missed. So that one was something that, again, it didn't even need to go to court. The inspector owned up and said, yeah, that was my bad kind of thing, and was willing to take on that. So it didn't go. But again, that was 4 or 5 months down the road. Yeah, no, I'm just using that as kind of a negligence example.
To me, the termites could have shown up afterwards since it was.
I said termites. I don't remember if it was water damage or termites, but ultimately the fact that the inspector did not check it and check the rest of that bathroom put a target on that inspector, and that's a pretty hard one to try and get out of. Yeah. And again, admitting to saying like I failed to open up those cabinets, and again, that's one of the reasons why that buyer got them.
There's burrows, tunnels, and all sorts.
Sure, right. Right.
We had one with ERA where the inspector didn't go up in the attic, and the trusses were all infested with termites. And because ERA had recommended the inspector, ERA was equally liable with the inspector, and there was a lawsuit procured, $15,000-$20,000. So that's why we give a list, and we don't necessarily recommend one inspector. It's for our liability, so it's a disconnect.
Yeah. Well, the thing about WDOs, just because you guys brought it up, a home inspector is not allowed to report on a WDO. Just so y'all know, the state of Florida Department of Agriculture will slam us. One of our inspectors got charged $500.
But if you see termites in an attic, you can't say there's termites in the attic.
No, sir. No, sir.
Can you say there's damage or anything like that?
The only thing we're allowed to say, and this is per Department of Ag, and you can talk to any pest control company, we can say that there's damage. We recommend a WDO.
Right.
That's the extent that we can go.
Right.
My guys try writing termite damage and stuff like that all the time. I'm like, you guys, I'm gonna punch you in the throat.
Right.
And I have to take it out of the reports.
Right.
Because again, one of our guys we got 17 offices in Florida. A guy up in the Panhandle, because he wrote WDO, the Department of Ag fined him $500 for his first offense. It's $5,000 a second offense.
4-point covers what?
Roof, plumbing, electrical, HVAC.
So HVAC was the last one we haven't talked about. Real quick, sorry, I forgot. Attic thing, and I go back to this. Josh is not going to move the car that's in the garage to get to the attic. He's not going to get into it and move it. So again, it's another point to tell your sellers, move the car.
And electrical panel.
What you can't do, so that we are aware that you couldn't get in the attic, so that we.
Oh yeah, they noted it.
Okay.
Yeah. If there's something we can't do, we can't get to, we annotate. Will we do everything we can to try to get to that area? Yeah. Will we call people and say, hey, who has the keys to this? Come move it. I mean, none of my guys will move it, but if they call me and there's keys there, me personally, I'll go over, I'll take the responsibility. I'm not gonna put that on my guys to move a car, and I'll get permission from everybody, first, hey, Wayne, can I move this car? I'm backing it up, record me as I back it up, and everything. So, it's, the problem with home inspectors, it is a huge CYA. If you've ever seen any of our reports, and it's only been called fluff one time that I know of, but we put all these pictures in there, all the sinks, underneath the sinks, the plumbing, everything, that we put all those pictures in the report to show that it was checked. Granted, you can sit there and say, well, how do I know you just didn't take a picture and move on? Okay, yeah, you can say that, but it doesn't make sense to me to do that either, not when that's our job. So those are some of the things. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, we're here to work with you. I mean, we can't make everything, right. If there's an issue, we have to report on it. We're just as liable as you are. Again, I don't know if anybody saw my post here a few months ago. If anybody wants to ride around with me for a day and take the phone calls and the lashing that I take in a day, I'll be happy to let you come on board. Or I can just come sit in the office with one of y'all for a day and we'll just do phone calls. I've already got 8. So,
Complaints?
I don't know.
We'll see.
I mean, I get my fair share of complaints. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, a lot of them are kind of ridiculous. A 27-year-old HVAC system that was working fine 6 months ago, now you're mad at me because the Freon's leaking. Really? I mean, how am I supposed to know the Freon was supposed to?
Thank that AC unit for 27 years of good service.
Yeah. I mean, my crystal ball, I guess, was broke that day. I don't know.
Josh, I think it's important that we as realtors kind of explain to a buyer what your job is and what it does and does not do. The does not do is just as important as what it does do.
Yeah. Everything that we send out, if they read our agreements, if they read our report, it explains everything out. If there is something that we did not do, it's in the report. Moving furniture, moving things around, that's in the report. One of the big things that catches a lot of inspectors, and it caught me early on, for me to make a change to my report, is closets, especially master closets that are adjacent to bathrooms. We're not able to tell if it's stocked with a bunch of stored items. I can't tell if that thing's leaking, if the wall is covered in black because the shower pan's leaked. So I had to put something in my report saying, hey, look, I can't see all this. When everything's moved, we recommend you doing a walkthrough and checking all these areas, because many times that stuff gets moved out. They move in after closing, no one did a walkthrough, that wall's solid black. And they come after us because the shower pan's leaking. Whoa. We told you to look first. So.
And while we're on kind of the topic, 2 points I want to make. One, I always love hearing realtors, and I've heard them, from agents in our own office. Well, the inspector killed my deal, right? Well, right. It's the goal. Josh's goal when he starts an inspection is like, yeah, I'm gonna screw this deal. That's
I wake up in the morning.
top of the list. Right. That's what he strives for. Josh doesn't understand that his business revolves directly around us giving him more business. So his intention is always to screw a deal. So let's wipe that off the table really fast. Number 2, who hires the home inspector?
The buyer.
The buyer, not the seller. The seller does not have to say, hey, Josh, don't look at the leaky roof. Don't look at the faulty plumbing. Wink, wink. No. Not the case. So again, please don't take, and the second point I'm trying to make with this is like, it literally solves no problems. It doesn't get you anywhere by turning around and just blasting a home inspector when the seller's upset when that inspection report came back. You saying Josh is an idiot, he doesn't know what he's doing, literally doesn't get you anywhere in the deal. It probably digs you a deeper hole because it just makes the seller more angry and more upset. Yeah. So my outlook on all of that is find the solution. So first and foremost, I'll have a conversation with Josh and say, hey, Josh, here's the situation. Josh may say, hey, this is what I report, this is how I do it, and that's the way it is. Or Josh may say, hey, Wayne, did you actually look at the inspection report? Because I noted here's this, I recommend this, do this. So again, read the dang report all the way through thoroughly.
Not just the summary page.
Right, not just, don't flip to the last page, all right, so we're good, okay, it's fine. Because it's gonna come up. So please, read the report. Read the report with the seller or with the buyer, whichever side and whatnot. But again, it's definitely not Josh's goal in life to screw every deal that we have, because he'd go out of business if that was his goal. So I really don't like that. Are there bad inspectors? Yes. Do mistakes happen? Yes. We're all human and all of that. It's obviously important. Again, it's why we recommend multiple inspectors and whatnot. But also, you guys establish your relationship with inspectors. Josh has done a lot of my home inspections. He's been very fair. When a mistake does happen, Josh has owned up to any issue that really we've ever had that we feel home team should have caught, and he does it without calling up his E&O insurance or liability. Obviously, if there's something major, which knock on wood, personally, I have not dealt with Josh on that matter at all. But Josh, wants to make it right. He wants to help the deal happen and all of that. So, but yeah, don't take the side of the inspector killed the deal. We're going to blame the inspector. If there's something obvious on the inspection report and Josh caught it and that deal killed and the seller doesn't want to fix it, we can probably say even if Josh doesn't do the next one, the next inspector is going to catch it. Yeah. So it does need to be addressed.
And from my understanding, again, I'm learning more about real estate than I should. If things are put on there and you're the listing agent, you know about it, it's supposed to go on the MLS. Isn't that correct?
We have to legally disclose it.
Yeah. Josh, the other thing is the home inspector is one line of defense for us, between us and a disaster. If you miss something, if you hit something, it keeps us from having a bad experience. Let me ask you about two other things. Outside, your septic tank, is that part of your plumbing or is it separate and aside from? And do you have any comments on septics and or sprinkler systems?
So I'll start with sprinkler systems. Sprinklers we do for the report. There's no additional charge for it. It's just part of the inspection. The only thing I don't do with irrigation anymore is I don't turn on valves. We used to turn on valves, and for some reason we had a run of every time we turn on a valve, it'd break, water go gush down all over the place, and then who's the last one that touched it is the one that has to fix it. So if everything's set to go, we can just turn manually on, go around, watch the sprinkler heads pop up, make sure that everything's working fine. We do that. Okay. Again, the sprinkler we just consider it as a courtesy, going around just checking everything out. Septics. Septic, although it's part of the plumbing system, the thing about septics is the state says only a licensed septic company can do the inspection on the septic tank. So we partnered up with people. We have septic companies that come out to do the septic inspections. Ultimately, it all falls on them if there's issues with the septic afterwards.
Do you flush toilets or anything to see? Because we've had empty houses become occupied and the septic isn't working, the drain field, and that's the problem.
Yeah, so
you really can't sit there in an hour to make that happen.
No, I mean we try to stress the system as bad as we can. So we go in, we turn on all the lights, we start running dishwashers, appliances, HVAC systems, we turn on the sinks, the commodes, the tubs. We try to turn everything on. We stress that house as much as we can. We've had an incident where the main breaker has popped and we couldn't get the main breaker back on, before. That happened here, but we stressed it and that main breaker popped. They ended up getting an electrician out there. Correct me if I'm wrong. They went out and he had to slam it on to get it on. And he even annotated that the panel, there was something wrong with the panel besides us. But, and then the plumbing. If we start hearing gurgling or air pockets and stuff like that, one of two things usually happens with that. It either has a bad ventilation system or the septic is backing up. We've actually been in houses where we turn the water on, 5 minutes later, it's flooding in the house. Turn everything off, and it's like, call somebody, hey, the septic backed up, we're trying to get everything cleaned up the best we can, but that ultimately would not fall on us. And I know that could be an argument on, well, you're the one that caused it. No, I'm the one that found it.
Right.
You know,
And real quick,
Answer this, you have the you have your inspection, and now you're saying you should get a septic tank company that is licensed. Same thing with the roof? Is that?
no, the roof, I mean, we can look at the roofs. I mean, the only thing with the roofs is if it gets to a certain age or if it has certain defects that are showing on the roof.
What do we need in addition to you in order to make sure that we've done the best we can to prevent?
So for like your typical home inspection, I mean, depending on what it is and what type of loan they're doing, I mean, home inspection, septic inspection if it has septic.
WDO.
And WDO. I mean, as far as anything else, I mean, I don't,
that's a choice.
You can get a roof inspector out.
Right, if they want,
Yeah.
And again, I always say too, home inspection first, because they're the broad overview that kind of puts eyes on everything. And then a second that somebody in that home inspection says, this may be of concern, okay, do you want to get your roof inspected by a roofer?
What about electrician?
Well, again, if it's something that they're notating, let's get an electrician out there. Let's go call up one of these 3 electricians and have them check it out. Real quick though, because Josh did talk about something that came up. The whole Josh turns out all the water, stress tests it, turns on, a bunch of electrical and then it pops and whatnot. I love this one. The seller's like, well, I don't run all of my showers and flush all my toilets and run all of my sinks at the same time, so that's ridiculous. Well, your house was designed to be able to do that, right? When it was built, you should be able to turn everything on. So no, Josh didn't break your house.
yeah.
Josh found the flaw, and yes, it's not something common, but your house should be able to do it.
Yeah.
Right? Should be able to do that.
Could you tell us something before you go about mobile homes? What are you looking for? And the piers, you have shields and those sort of things?
So mobile homes are essentially no different than a regular home. The big thing that you run into with mobile homes now, and I can say that I don't know any insurance companies that'll write it. If the mobile home is prior to 1994 or 5, somewhere in that era, and it has gray lines coming up for the supply lines, that's polybutylene piping. There's not an insurance company out there that I know that will write an insurance policy with the gray pipes, polybutylene. So you always want to look for the red, blue, or clear, or the yellow pipes coming up for mobile homes. Underneath, when we're underneath looking in the crawl space, we're checking to see if the insulation, poly barrier is there. There's no dips. If there's a big bubble, then that's usually where a leak has happened. We're looking the piers, making sure none of them are shifted, leaning. They're all good. If they have the metal shards on them, those are termite protectors. Is what those are.
That's required.
Right. So termites go up, they can't get into the home. They just fall off. One thing I do now, just so you guys know, I do the HUD FHA tie down engineers reports. So I can go in and do the underneath
That's
reports.
the main concern for financing. If it isn't up to par
Right.
code, then they have to.
Right. And the company that I'm with is on the 96 code. So the biggest thing you want to look at, if you look underneath, is the strappings can't be they can be up to 6 foot apart. They cannot be more than 6 foot apart, and that will fall under the 96 code.
And what's that cost if we just want to get you out there to do?
So I do 2 things. If you want me to just go do an investigation to see if it's passed, like there's no inspections or anything like that, I'll go out there for $100 and just do the investigation.
Right.
If you want me to do the full thing, it's $425.
$425.
Yeah.
And would the $100 investigation, as long as that becomes clear, like FHA doesn't require anything more, they don't need anything more than that, or are they going to need something?
They all need
a stamp of approval?
Yeah.
But you guys provide that with the 425 or
Yeah, with the
425, you okay.
That's the full report.
Okay.
So
And that's for purposes of financing.
Correct.
that's a lot of times your lenders.
Code, you have to make it up to the current code with your installation.
Right. So some lenders. So what was going on is there was a couple different engineer companies out there that would not write for 1996. They would only write for the 2002 code and newer. But lenders were always like, "We'll take the 96 code." So I found an engineer company that will write the 90. That's all they write, 96 and newer. so I'm with them, and they basically they charge me. I turn around, charge you guys, and then they submit the report. And they're actually fast. I mean, I actually did 2 on Monday, and I had the reports by 6 o'clock Monday night. So as long as there's not a whole lot going on, I get their reports usually within about 24 hours. Where Haymans and stuff like that, they were taking them sometimes 1 to 2 weeks.
Will you remove skirting to get underneath the
Yeah.
mobile home? Okay.
I know some WDO companies won't know.
We've run,
Not all.
not always,
Not
yeah.
with vinyl, not
Yeah.
with vinyl skirting. You gotta lift up the top. Hopefully it's not all screwed. Pull it and then lift up.
So yeah, we had the WD, that's why I asked. We had the WDO one that literally called us up and said, I'm not pulling anything, so.
Yeah, well, I've heard of that. So,
Find a different WD.
Yep. I said, okay.
so like the new code, that bottom right picture or the top right picture on the right side there, that one. The new code, the 2004 code, those are your stabilizer jacks. So all your 2004 and newer, they'll have those underneath the middle. Those are the stabilizer jack. They'll either put them in each one of the corners or they'll put them in the middle where the double wides tie down. That's where those are. And then your regular straps that you had there, that whichever.
Here's one that you can kind of see how it.
Yeah, they're augered down, which is very common. And then just whichever one it was showing the distance of
And
them.
you need fill, or you need some kind of barrier on the ground now?
It's not a bad idea to put some type of barrier on the ground. It's not, you don't necessarily have to do it, but it does make things a lot easier. That's another stabilizing jack. Yeah. But anyways, the straps, so what will happen is you'll have one that's going to go straight vertical and then diagonal, and then the next one will probably either go just diagonal or vertical, and then the next one it'll be 2 points. So every other one it's a 2-point connection, and the ones in the middle is either cross or whatever. So that one that's just a regular jack in the corner there. But yeah, so we can do those now. And like I said, we usually get those reports the night of, the next day. They're pretty quick on getting them back to us. But nothing's really not done different. It's the same type of inspection on those as it is a regular house.
We appreciate your expertise and your professionalism. We do highly recommend you, but we have to sometimes ask a company or two, you understand the liability.
I understand. I understand fully. Yep. Just them other companies, make sure you understand their insurance.
Right.
And also, I always say it because there is companies out there that do it. Whoever's doing the inspection, make sure they are licensed. Just because I send someone out to do the inspection, if they don't have a license, that doesn't make it right because Florida says you have to be licensed. You don't work under a licensed person as a home inspector. You have to be licensed.
Turnaround time on your reports right now.
Guys have gotten really good. We usually get them out the night of, sometimes a couple hours after. Ancillary inspections, we usually get the next business day, I'll say.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, say anything that was done today, I've already talked to them. They're going to have the stuff to me on Friday, but if they were going to be closed Friday, I wouldn't get it till Monday. So holidays are sometimes a little off, but ancillary inspections, we usually get the next business day.
So 24 to 48 hours would be reasonable as long as it's a holiday or weekend.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and like I said, you'll have our report that night. I mean, we've really mastered the tablets and getting things done where we've done an inspection at 9 a.m. and you've had the report in your inbox by 1 o'clock.
Um,
Being that the buyer pays you for the inspection, do you also talk to the owner if they're there when you're done to point things out, or no?
No.
Okay.
Sometimes, I mean, has it happened on mistake? Yes, I'll say it has. Even I've mistaken someone pulling up thinking they were the buyer, not knowing that they were the homeowner.
Uh-huh.
Because it's awkward when it's just the inspector there and no one else is there. It's like you walk up and like, hey, I'm Josh, and he's like, hey, I'm Wayne. I'm like, okay, yeah, and they don't necessarily say that they're the buyer. They're walking around like they are a buyer, but it's happened a couple of times where they're the
Homeowner.
seller and they kind of fooled us, not knowing. But I guess not catching that name is a problem sometimes, or a couple of times they've had the same names.
Right. So, and this was actually right to the point that I was going to make too. And sometimes we obviously can do it, but it's if you have a seller that says, I want to be there, make sure they understand Josh or whoever is hired by the buyer. And that's the buyer's report that they're getting. It's not the seller's. It'll be up to the buyer to give it.
And don't,
Also, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, don't take, when you ask the inspector, and this will go for any inspection company, I don't know how everybody answers this, how's everything look? If we sit there and say it all looks okay, we're just being nice. You know, I don't want to sit there and say, you know, no, there's a bunch of issues or there's this, because we're not supposed to talk to you. Things are okay, or no comment. I mean, it does put us in a weird situation. If you want to tell the story, go ahead. If you remember what I'm talking about,
I don't remember that
the
one.
roof with a hole in it.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think the point that Josh is trying to make ultimately at the end of the day is, personally, wait till the report happens. Again, that's where all the information is going to, and again, I'm not going to expect Josh to literally name off every little thing that he found or didn't find, you know what I mean? So wait for the report. But one thing for you, Josh, one, if we know a homeowner's going to be there and we know you're inspecting it, would you like us to just be like, hey, homeowner is going to be there via text, email? Would that help you? Would that be beneficial to
Usually
you?
when you're doing the order and you're talking to my office and everything, or you're talking to me, one of the questions is it present or occupied? And if they say it's occupied, if you want to give them the note at that time, the seller will be there to give you access, you know, but there is a super just in case they're not there.
Right.
That gives us the idea, you know, of them being there.
Yeah.
So,
Just say that the buyer paid for the report, it's his report, if he cares to share it, he will.
and that's what we do. That's what we do a lot of times. I mean, but you have some people that are just, I hate to use the word rude, but they're rude. They don't care. You're on their property, you're doing things to their property, and they want to know what's going on and what your findings are. And no matter how nice you are and you try to explain those things, they're just persistent with you.
Right.
And again, we do professionalism. You know, sorry, I can't talk to you. The buyer's paying for this, but they don't care. They can just keep on you like
Well,
a 2-year-old.
And the other thing we've had is like, you give those answers, the seller then thinks you're a you know what, and then when the report comes out and the buyer asks for these things, it's, well, they didn't know what they were doing because they were mean to me, right? Like that's the route that this goes down that we've seen time and time again. So again, best thing for us to do as listing agents is educate the seller on the process. So in the moment, they already know Josh is there, paid by the buyer, for the buyer. He's not going to sit there and vomit everything to the seller.
Sure, you can't say anything technically, you're not supposed to.
Right. But again, us educating our customers up front avoids a lot of those issues, and that's what I strive for, so we don't have any surprises. So, you know, the seller doesn't call us and say, well, Josh was very mean to me, and I don't think I'm going to like anything he has to say in that inspection report. If that's the tone that's set, we know it's going to be an uphill battle to get this thing through.
What about having the buyers there? You prefer them not to be there?
It doesn't really matter to us. I mean, sometimes when the buyers are there, if there are issues that are found or things that are found, it makes things easier to explain to them. You know, I think our reports are very well written and it can explain a lot, but not everybody can understand everything that's said sometimes, and I understand that too.
Some people just like a human interaction versus a paper
Right,
or a tablet or,
right.
you know, computer interaction.
The only thing that sometimes gets us offset with the human interaction versus the report is we might kind of downplay something a little bit where it's not that big of a deal, but the report might make it sound a little bit stronger than that way we said it. And that's just our misinterpretation on when we explain it sometimes. So we'll get calls on that just for verification or clarification, excuse me.
And what I, again, try and educate my buyers for that instance is let Josh do the inspection first. Because if you follow him around and you point and his inspection just went from 3 hours to 6 hours because and he'll probably not make it go that long. I get that. But again, coach him to say, hey, let him do the whole inspection first. He can come back at the end and say, hey, you know, this is what I mean when I say the shower is loose or the toilet's loose. Like, check this out. So again, you can just put he can can show that stuff, but let him do his job first. And I try again, educate all the buyers I can on that principle to let them get through the inspection.
If you're inspecting a really old home that hasn't been taken care of and you do normal things and it breaks, you're not responsible for fixing it, right?
Technically, no.
Yeah.
But it all falls into the last man syndrome. Is the property, is it occupied? Is it not occupied? Is it, been vacant for a long period of time?
A lot of different things to it.
Right. So it all depends. I mean, an exterior spigot, I go to unscrew a hose and I break the damn thing off. Ultimately, does it fall on me? Technically, no. But if I can get a plumber out there to fix it for a couple $100, I'll just get it done. But it happens.
Right.
So I go off of what's going to be the best cause for this and who's this going to piss off versus make happy.
Long term.
Yeah. And Josh understands, obviously, he runs a business, we run a business. He gets that idea. We were talking about too, nobody wants to be taken advantage of for, their ability to help out and whatnot. So there is lines in the sand, just like we also do the same thing. Stefan, you stepped up and paid for a garage door to be fixed next day because it came up. Josh has stepped up and paid for things to be fixed. I know this is taking a little bit long. Last thing I want to talk about real quick, wells. When you're doing your water test, just real quick, give me a 30-second summary of that situation.
Water test, it's hit and miss across the county.
What do you test for first and foremost?
Okay, so
Those that don't
depending on what the lender wants, we can either test for bacteria, which is total coliform and E. coli, or we can test for what they call the big test, BAFHA, which is bacteria, total coliform, E. coli, nitrates, nitrites, and lead. Best way to make these things pass is turn the water on the night before and let it run.
Especially if it's vacant.
Yeah, especially if it's vacant. Turn it on 2 days ahead of time.
Chlorinated?
Huh?
Are you recommending chlorination as well? 2 gallons of bleach down the well?
If you know how to do it, I would only do about a half gallon. If you know how to do it, maybe go ahead and do it. 2 things.
No, that means none of you guys do it.
Yeah, I mean, basically, but a couple things with that. Turn off your ice makers, turn off the water heater, those things. Just make sure those are turned off for when you chlorinate it and run it through. Right now, I used to be able to kind of pinpoint what areas would fail and what areas would pass. But right now, I can't even pinpoint because it's all over the board. Highlands is passing on a regular basis now, but
Which it used to fail. I
it
mean,
used to fail all the
real
time.
quick, another story. Josh tested well. We had it. Josh went out there and did everything he possibly, retested it. I mean, he was out there, I think, 3 or 4 times. And finally, he's like, Wayne, I don't think I can get this one to pass. You may want to call someone else, or maybe it is something more than that. And so, Josh did everything he possibly could and helped us out, because I don't even think he charged on like rounds 3 and 4 at the end of the day. He's just trying to help get this deal closed. We ended up calling, I think it was IREP Pro H2O, who was able to do something different and got, you know what I mean? So, but again, Josh was willing to do everything he possibly could to help out, get this test to say the right things. So,
But that's it. I mean, you run the water, you clean the spigot that you're doing with bleach or chlorine or the wipes. Collect the sample. When you collect samples, the pump should be on. You don't want it just sitting there dead, not on. When it's on, that means it's flowing the water. You collect your samples. We send them off to the lab. The lab gets its reports back, and then we send them to you, and then you can see what's what. Full kits, FHA, VA, where it's the bacteria, total nitrates, nitrites, and lead. If bacteria fails, I don't care what these lenders say, I'll fight with them for you if you need to. I like fighting with them. All you gotta do is a re-bacteria test. But some of these VAs and
they
stuff
want
like
a
that,
full test
they
again?
want a full test again because they want it all on the same paper. And I'm like, no. You're not going, you're supposed to be helping out a veteran or this or that, and you're wanting them to pay this much money to have a full test again. Not gonna happen. Plus, you take the liability because you just chlorinated and you did this, something else can come up in it. Lead typically comes up after you chlorinate.
Up to it.
Full, it's about a week or two.
What's that?
It take about a week or two for the full test.
To get the results back and all that.
Bacteria I can get back in about 48 hours. The full kits I get back. If I take it on Monday, I'll have it on Friday, Tuesday.
About a week.
Monday,
Yeah, we'll say about a week.
We can rush them and get them a day earlier on the full kits, but it, most of the time it's not that big of a deal. So.
We didn't really cover it, but HVAC as far as the 4-point, real quick, just what do you do?
The house is cool when I walk in, or the house is warm when I walk in. It looks like it's working.
Yeah.
Reporting the age, and we're not running a full
Cycle and all
function
that.
test.
Yeah.
We do it on a home
So you do
inspection.
the temperatures at the vents, 2 places.
Basically, like I just said, if I walk in and it's nice and cool in the house, it's working.
Yeah.
I'm not doing a full function test.
Right.
4-point.
And again, that is what the 4-point is asking. Is it functioning? It's not asking for a temperature range. It's not asking you to cycle from a 80-degree heat cycle to a 60-degree AC. That's what he does for the home inspection, but the 4-point is not.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah, that's what I wanted you to make. Like I said, I asked for the 4-point.
Yeah,
He's
home
just making
inspection
sure.
will do that.
Correct. A home inspection, he does it. Yep.
So the one thing, two things about a 4-point. If we're just there to do a 4-point, we're running in with blinders. We're just doing what they ask. Okay, so don't try selling, and I'm not trying to say this the wrong way. Don't try selling a 4-point as a home inspection, because there's so many times we go out, we do a 4-point in a wind mitt, and that's all they do as buyers, and then we get a phone call that the water heater's not working or something like that. It's like we only did a 4-point. We turned the water on, this, and this. That's it.
We check those 4 points. Like, that's it.
If we do a home inspection, okay, now a 4-point does not call for GFCIs. If we do a full home inspection, and I get this a lot, if we see a small drip leak or if a GFI is not working, technically we're supposed to put that in the 4-point because we found it doing a full home inspection and the names that are going on certain things. I don't put them on there. Number one, the GFCI, I think you're going to get fixed. And number two, if it's a small drip leak, why am I going to make a big deal out of something that I know you're going to get fixed and you're not going to let it sit there? Now, if the house is just in a wreck shape, yeah, I'm going to put it on there. Okay, but if it's a regular house, just has a small leak that happened, whatever, I'm not going to put it on there. So that's sometimes the conflicts that I'll get.
By doing the full
Josh,
with the 4-point.
right, you said the full home inspection, there was leaks here, but you didn't put it on the 4-point.
Right.
So I don't know if that means you're showing the 4-point to the other agent versus the summary or whatever. But yeah, that 4-point, I don't always put everything on there that I need to, because I don't want to cause more problems than what I have to. That makes sense.
And if you were to just do the, yeah.
Yes, that's what you're talking about.
Yep.
Yeah,
And if you would have just went into the house and done the 4-point, it wouldn't have got noted anyway.
probably not.
Like just as a 4-point.
Right, because I probably would have ran the water and it wouldn't
Right.
have been leaking until after the water ran for 10 minutes.
Right.
So,
You have one of those heat temperature guns?
yeah, probably.
Okay.
I think that's about it. I can't really think of it.
Thorough and informative, we appreciate it. I wish all 64 agents were here.
Well, anytime, if you guys get together, I mean, I'll be happy to come in and do more in depth.
We'll probably get maybe another CE class.
Yeah.
Potentially, I think maybe after March, because that's when the licensor runs out. So if we do it after March, everybody will get new credit for their next 14 hours. So maybe something like that we can do.
Yeah, we can run through a couple, scenarios, get a couple CE credits, and then I can make sure I have, I got my laptop in the truck. I was going to bring it in, but I was like, yeah, we'll just do kind of an informative thing to be able to answer questions and stuff. But then I can pull up things and show different things, some of the stuff that I am now, just a lot has changed. I'm a licensed mold assessor. I wasn't advertising it because I really wanted to learn more about it before I started, putting my name out there.
Our mold thing.
Yeah. I could do the FHA engineer tie down reports, reports. I'm in the process of being radon certified, so probably by the beginning of next year I should be radon certified.
Getting your hazmat suit out.
So yeah. I got a couple teams running around. We're all licensed, fully licensed and insured. So I have no problem sharing that. And if your clients ever have a problem with anything, call us. We want to work through it. We're not going to sit there and not answer their calls. So.
And on top of all that, Josh is a vet. He served, so we appreciate that as well.
Thank you. All right.
You got cards?
Yeah. I'll go grab some.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yep. So, I'm gonna go grab some. I'll be right back. Yep.
We appreciate you, Josh.
Yes, sir, thank you.